Hello and welcome to the Cambridge Skeptics live stream. The Cambridge Skeptics are a volunteer organization. We are dedicated to promoting critical thinking, science, and positive skepticism in our local community of Cambridge, but also across the UK and beyond. And today we are having a debate, discussion, and argument about conspiracy theories and which conspiracy theory is the most dangerous. And I thought maybe before we got started, we should give a little intro as to why we wanted to have this discussion tonight. Like, Chris, you were the one who proposed it. What were you thinking?
So there was an article on Gizmodo I saw a few weeks back where they asked various academics and experts that study this what they thought the most dangerous conspiracy theory in history was. And I thought, yeah, it's okay seeing what academics and experts think, but what I want to know is what a bunch of random schmoes on the YouTube think about this.
And here we are. I'll lead show number 4 tonight. So what are the 4 conspiracy theories that we have picked?
Are we revealing that now, or are we
going
to go one by one? We'll go one by one.
Okay, one by one.
Well, since this was my idea, I think I volunteered to kick off, yeah? Okay. So, do you know who these people are? And I don't want you to dox them. I just want you to tell me what the event was.
I do.
Burning Man?
The Fire Festival?
It was
Andrew helped.
a lovely bunch of fellows, some really decent people on both sides.
Very fine people, I believe they were describing.
Very fine people on both sides.
Yes. It's from that thing in the US.
Yes.
Oh, that's Phil, wasn't it?
Yes, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017.
Wow, now, that long ago. Oh my goodness.
There was a 2020 didn't happen.
Yeah, something happened in between those that just felt like it took ages. So yes. So I've been looking into these guys, and I think they might have been working on some wrong ideas, possibly even conspiracy theories. So do you remember what their catchphrase was at that rally?
No.
Do you remember what they were chanting?
No.
No.
I wasn't there.
It got a fair amount of TV coverage. So they had the chant, "You will not replace us," which confused a lot of people coming from the outside.
What about the spelling of Europa?
Europa.
I did not look into that. Sorry. So yeah, so "you will not replace us," and various media outlets dug into this to work out what the hell they were talking about, and they came to the conclusion that they were talking about this. It's called the Great Replacement Theory, or sometimes called white genocide. There's a slight difference between the two, which we will go into. So ADL's definition of this is that the white race is dying due to growing non-white populations and forced assimilation. And the ADL describes this as one of the most deeply held modern white supremacist convictions. A lot of the analysis linked it to this man. This is a French novelist called Renard Camus. I'm sure I've butchered that pronunciation. And his theory is that he published it in a book called Le Grand Replacement in 2011. And he said Muslim immigration to France was a form of genocide against the country's native population that required drastic action in response. And this was picked up with the idea of being replaced and chanted at the Charlottesville rally. And after that, Camus published a second book, which summarized his ideas in English, seeing a gap in the market. Camus distanced himself from these guys. He said, "I don't support violence, but I understand their concerns." And this has been picked up by various political parties on the right, such as this one from Alternative for Denmark.
Deutschland.
Deutschland's Germany.
Sorry, yes, Deutschland.
It's fine, that's why we're here.
Thank you. So yeah, as you can see, the slogan is "New Germans will make them ourselves." So a lot of this comes from the idea that immigrants tend to reproduce faster than native populations, for want of a better phrase. As data scientists, I wonder if you see any possible flaws in that theory.
Well, the first thing that what I thought of was like an interesting fact about measuring human reproduction, which is an entirely different fact, which is some of our best data about like what's the like maximum number of children that like a normal person would have in their lifetime, normal female, I would say normal woman would have, is looking at when women were brought into new colonies so there was a thing in North America where women were brought from France to be the wives of settlers in French-speaking colonies in North America. They were called les filles du roi, the girls of the king, and they would then, and like it's an interesting statistic, like women tend to have on average 6 live births when they're like sort of reproducing in these like maximally abundant resource type scenarios. Anyways, total aside, but I wondered whether there's a similar factor of like, you know, you're suddenly free, you've got ample resources, that maybe that's something that could be going on.
Yeah,
and I think this is relatively well documented that most of Western Europe and Japan, I think, don't reproduce at a replacement level. You need about 2.1 children per woman in order to be able to replace, because some die off or don't make it. Yeah, basically just don't make it to adulthood. So to maintain a population of like 2.1, I think Japan's now like 1.6 naturally. And so if you're going to maintain your population, you need immigration.
Or to make them yourself, which is where a lot of this overlaps with reproductive rights.
Yeah.
A lot of these people are in favor of women being locked in the home and becoming baby factories, basically.
It's interesting how as soon as you give women education and control over their reproduction, birth rates plummet.
Well, exactly, that's the problem. We're assuming that immigrants will continue to reproduce at the same rate in future generations, whereas in fact, second, third generations tend to reduce their reproduction rate to the same as native populations anyway. So.
Because it is cultural, not genetic.
Biological.
Just saying it explicitly.
Okay, so Camus cites a couple of inspirations for his idea. One of them is this guy, Jean Raspail, a novelist. He wrote this fictional novel in, let me find the date, 1973, which is about a sudden mass migration from India, overwhelming France and the West, and then onto America. And this was picked up by a lot of people on the right as sort of an inspirational work for them. This is the danger we're facing. Another inspiration Camus cites is Enoch Powell with his famous Rivers of Blood speech in 1968, where he really rallied against immigration into Great Britain. And you can see this idea down in the bottom here. Diversity is chasing down the last white person. So they say anyone that's pushing for diversity is actually pushing for the genocide of the white race.
Wasn't he I thought Powell was, maybe I'm misremembering. I thought he was more focused, not so much on, it wasn't so much the immigration itself, it was integration, and more so than maybe I'm misremembering.
Possibly, I don't know. Both are considered a problem.
Oh, yes, it was. Yeah, it wasn't a great speech.
Another possible inspiration was Bat Ye'or, who was a British Egyptian Jewish writer who's proposed this idea of Eurabia. Well, she didn't propose it; she popularized it. What she says is, Europe has surrendered to Islam and is in a state of submission, something she describes as dimitude, in which Europe is forced to deny its own culture, stand silently by in the face of Muslim atrocities, accept Muslim immigration, and pay tribute through various types of economic assistance. The Israeli historian Robert Vistrich described this book as the Protocols of the Elders of Brussels, which I thought was a great title. And again, this idea of Eurabia has come up in the AFD's work again there. One other possible inspiration for this is this guy. This is the Austrian, I've got to get my country straight, Austrian lyrical poet, Gerd Hosnick, seen here in handcuffs going to prison for Holocaust denial.
Read us a poem.
Well, tell us more, Chris.
So he came up with this theory he called the Kalergi plan. So he found this Richard Kaldove Kalergi, who was, let me get this right, an Austrian-Japanese politician who was one of the pioneers of European integration. And he wanted to show the whole European idea from the beginning was secretly a plan for the Jews to turn Europe into a mixed race of blacks and Asians ruled over by the Jews. I think the Jews bit is in brackets there because Kalergi wasn't Jewish, so the we didn't make much sense there. And we've seen this sort of come into the Brexit propaganda quite a lot. If you look at what Kalergi actually said, you'll see it's much more subtle about the future being people mixing together and joining together. But obviously, if you're viewing this through a lens of white replacement anxiety, then you get the misreading. And another problem with this is that it sort of brings up this one drop rule. The idea that anyone with one drop of blood from a different race is no longer a pure member of that race.
It reminds me of I'm trying to remember who it was. Famous guitarist Jimi Hendrix, maybe. I think he had basically, yeah, he came over to, I think he was, I'm probably misremembering this, but I think maybe he was like Jamaican and came over to the US and was found himself described as black, which was really curious to him because due to his heritage and the fact that Barbados was predominantly black, he was described as white in Barbados. It was this curious thing that if you have, as you say, if you have one drop of the other, you're considered other, even though you might be predominantly or just half and half.
Yeah, I mean,
from whatever.
The first US black president was half white. So.
Yes.
Race is a social construct. It doesn't make much sense when you start digging into it.
Yeah.
So this is where the great replacement theory comes from, and it's a great theory. It's unlikely that the people at the Charlottesville rally were particularly influenced this, because I think they probably don't read Jewish writers or
at all.
I thought you were just going to say how they just don't read.
Yeah, just don't read.
Or gay French intellectuals. So
no, that's an ad hominem.
So there is a second sort of strain, the white genocide theory, and we have here some graffiti. We have 1488 and a gun site, I guess that is. Does anyone know what 1488 refers to?
Is it something like 14 words or 14 principles or 88 words?
Yes, 14 lines, 88 characters.
It's some Nazi shit.
I thought it was, isn't it? H is the 8th word of the alphabet, 88 is Heil Hitler.
That's the other point for 88. Yeah, it's the HH. So yeah, you'll see 14 words coming up a lot in sort of this protest. 14 words. These are the 14 words. We must secure the resistance. Sorry, we must secure the existence of our race and a future for white children. So these were the words of David Lane, a neo-Nazi who went to prison in the end for collusion in the murder of a Jewish radio host. And the ADL described this as the most popular white supremacist slogan around the globe. Lane went on to write a second 14 words, because you always try to make a sequel. The second 14 words are, because the beauty of the white Aryan woman must not perish from the earth. I believe that is the correct response.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it's from Lane. Lane sort of blames this on Zog, the Zionist occupational government.
Okay.
It's all the work of the Jews, as usual.
Oh. How do they have time to do all these things? They're too busy.
Only 14 words. It doesn't take long to write 14 words.
They're faking all the NASA photographs as well. And
I know, they're amazing. Yeah. I'm glad they're running the world. They're very competent.
Exactly. They're really good at it.
Well, actually, I mean, we're 18 months into a pandemic. If they could pull their fingers out, get it dealt with.
So on to the 88. So that comes from this quote from one of Lane's heroes, which says pretty much the same thing as the 14 words. Right, so we're definitely not getting monetized, are we?
Not that we are.
Okay, so one of Lane's big influences is again a fictional novelist. I don't know why these great ideas seem to come from fiction. So this guy is William Luther Pierce. He was actually a professor of physics before he started his sort of own far-right group. And he wrote two very influential novels, The Turner Diaries, which is about a violent revolution, nuclear war, and race war that lead to the systemic extermination of non-whites and, of course, their leftist collaborators. And Hunter, in 1989, which is about a Vietnam vet who assassinates interracial couples and civil rights leaders in the Washington, D.C. area. Riveting reads, I'm sure. Pierce is quite specific. He wrote these books to educate people and teach them how to resist. He wanted people to fight back. So he wrote these books as instructional manuals for his followers to fight back against this white genocide and the Zionists. Tracing these ideas back even further, you of course get to the eugenicists. Madison Grant was a leading American eugenicist, and he wrote this book in 1916, The Passing of the Great Race. As we know, race is a fixed thing that never changes, and Grant was talking about something he called the Nordic race. He wasn't talking about the Aryan race, he was talking about the Nordic race. He was very specifically talking about Northern European bloodstock. And he was worried about it being diluted by these immigrants coming from places like Ireland, Italy, Poland, places that are now accepted by the majority of the right as white.
Just to cut in briefly, I'm a statistician by trade, so I read papers occasionally. And one of my favorite papers is an attempt to define race using genetics. And basically they had hundreds of thousands of sequenced genomes from all over the world. And they basically went, right, we're going to try and basically we're going to use what's called a linear discriminant analysis to basically cut off where the the races are. And basically what it does is each time you run it, it'll create a line or cutoff to say, actually, everyone in this group is on one side of the line and everyone in this group is on the other side. It'll sort of divide, and then it will make another division. You keep running it. And first off, the vast bulk of variation is within Africa, but also the continuum from sort of Northern Europe all the way through to kind of Southeast Asia is so granular. There's so little, there's so little in the way of hard cuts. It really just has there is nowhere where you can go, oh yeah, there we go, cut the line there. It's just this very gradual smoothing.
Well, it's like we're made up of buckets of genes, and why do we suddenly care about just those genes that control our skin color, and maybe to a lesser extent hair and eye color?
Well, but also there's I saw a breakdown into racism that showed actually a large number of racists don't understand that actually your ancestors' latitude of origin is broadly the thing that determines skin color. Like if your ancestors come from near the equator, they're going to be much darker than if they come from extreme high or low latitudes. Many racists just don't know that. They think there is something much more to it.
Wow.
Like not most, but a surprisingly large portion, something like a third. Which is just...
absolutely. So this is very flexible theory, and lots of the Polish, the Italians, the Irish are now accepted into the white group. And if you look at the Great Replacement theory, a lot of them accept Jews into the group as well, European Jews as natural allies against this Islamic horde that's invading. One interesting, so a lot of these people are also really interested in conservation and ecology. Grant was a leading conservationist of his time. And they sort of have this idea that a race is like a species. It has a certain niche place it needs, an environment it exists in, and it needs to be protected in that environment. And you can see this sort of, there's some very weird things in this. Africa for the Africans, Asia for the Asians, white countries for everyone. There's this idea that these other races are being protected in their environment, and only the white countries, curiously not Europe there for obvious reasons, colonialism. And the idea that this idea of multiculturalism is actually code for white genocide. One other interesting thing, a lot of these people talk about something called miscegenation, which is a word I had not heard before. Miscegenation is the mixing of races. And I traced this back, and the very word actually comes from a hoax. It comes from this pamphlet. The writer of that pamphlet's there, David Goodman Crowley.
Terrible mustache.
Really? I like it.
It seems unnecessary.
He was...
I think you could pull it off, Sam. Don't put yourself down.
Issues with that.
So he was what's known as a yellow journalist, which is basically the Daily Mail of his time. And he created this pamphlet encouraging the mixing of races to offend people and turn them against Abraham Lincoln in the 1864 presidential election. So the whole concept of miscegenation was invented as a hoax. So I was looking behind this, and obviously there's a very real psychological thing going on here, which has been termed white replacement anxiety. And there's been a couple of experiments into this. So in this one, they gave the control condition read information about current demographics, and the racial shift condition, they read documentation, which has been in a lot of newspaper reports, report this, the idea that the white race is going to be replaced. And they showed that, it didn't matter what your political leanings were, if you're left, right. This created some sort of upset in people. People became less trusting.
What's the thing being measure? What was the question they asked? Or
how do you? What was it? It was what's your favorability towards these races?
okay.
So yeah, the people that read this idea, whether they were on the left or the right, all expressed some less favorability when they'd read the idea. Another interesting one they did was, again, they did the same thing, but this time they focused specifically on Hispanic population growth. And they found that white people who read about Hispanic population growth were less likely to donate to Black charities. So if you read about one racial group dominating, you become distrustful of all the other racial groups, was their theory. So how widespread is this? So following the Trump campaign and the Brexit campaign, which sort of both played into these theories to some extent, researchers at the University of Cambridge looked into this. So on the lower end of the spectrum was the idea that immigration, government is deliberately hiding truth about how many immigrants really live in the country. And we can see, again, this isn't the majority. This is still a minority position. I want to point that out. But it's quite a severe minority position when you've got 47% of Brexiteers, 44% of Trump voters, 14% of Remainers, and 12% of Clinton voters, all expressing these concerns. If you look at the Great Replacement theory, specifically the idea that Islam immigration to this country is part of a bigger plan to make Muslims a majority in the country's population, you can still see very high responses to this across the board.
This always gets me. It's like, whose plan? Like, it's who would be coordinating this? Like, nobody in a position of power to control British immigration has had any leanings towards. It's just
as I said, the Americans blame Zog, the Zionist occupational government.
But why would they want to be replacing with Muslims? This doesn't.
Every time you say Zog, I think of Zorg, who was like the cult in Parks and Rec.
Maybe he was part of it. I don't know.
We'll have to kneel before Zod.
I was thinking of Zod.
And in the European context, they blame the EU, basically.
The same question. It's the same question for the EU.
Do you understand this is conspiracy theories?
Okay, yeah, sorry.
I think you've missed the concept. There's a conspiracy. Someone has to be behind it. Why? Who knows? If we compare this to some other theories that we might be coming to, Antivaxx, for example, much lower, except for Clinton voters. Yeah.
I do wonder if, given the distribution of this, it feels like given that they've split them up between Brexiteers and Remainers, Trump versus Clinton, that the poll itself happened relatively quickly after these elections.
It did, yeah.
And so
when was
presumably
it?
there's a temporary prevalence of the idea. So I wonder if there isn't a bit of a.
I think if I remember, it was 2018. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, a couple of years.
So it was a couple of years after. What else we got? Global warming hoax. Smaller across the board, except Trump voters, where it's slightly higher. And the international plot. So again, this is the idea that there's secret governments behind it all, and this is smaller. So
but more even.
More even. That's good. Yeah. So people who believe in the deep state and the Zog.
Wait. That means that there are.
Yeah, I know.
The government isn't the people in charge of this replacement. Is it like a grassroots movement or something?
Maybe they believe that the national government rather than an international government. Maybe it's the lizard people. I don't know. So why is this important? What's the concern here? Oh, and I just threw up the numbers for skeptics of all the conspiracies just to make us feel a little bit better there at the end. So yes, so seems to be some sort of genuine grievance here that's not being dealt with. We're not taking it seriously. The politicians are ignoring it, and it's allowing it to ferment and grow. And there are two ways this can go. You can end up joining a group, which will take action, and we saw this on January the 6th. A lot of those protesters were right-wing, driven by white genocide fears. And the other big problem is the lone actor. And we have just seen a huge list of lone actor terrorist activities over the last couple of years, well, decades. These come in two main groups. There's two main models. There's the Franklin model, which are basically serial killers. They go out and do small-scale attacks within the opposing community to try and build up fear and concern in the opposing community. And then there's the McVeigh model, where they do some big grand gesture, publish a manifesto, and usually take themselves out in the process. And both of these guys, they have they're always guys. I don't know why. Both of these guys seem to have the same sort of aim. They believe a race war is coming, and they wish to accelerate it. And that was my fun week reading about that. Thanks, guys.
You chose the topic. Yes, thank you.
But we have a little chat group where we discuss things, and all week Chris has been sending us comments saying, "Oh my God, I just read something horrific about white genocide again."
I'm getting steadily angry and angry.
more angry as the week went on.
So, do we want to say anything about this?
I guess, Chris, why do you think that this is particularly dangerous?
Because these guys want to start a race war. That scares me.
Yep, that's fine.
I don't like race wars. I'm generally against them.
I'm not a massive fan either.
And yeah, we are seeing genuine acts of violence in the name, and massive acts of violence. I mean,
yeah.
It's going to sound odd, but it feels like a very intense conspiracy. Like it's not a, it's incredibly involved, and is something you would center your life around.
Exactly. They feel there is a genuine concern. Something's happened. They have to act quickly. There's these novels and intellectuals encouraging them to act. It's becoming mainstream in right-wing media. Tucker Carlson and people are talking about it. And yeah, I would,
well-known intellectual.
I was shocked by how high those numbers were. Those numbers scared me.
So some good comments came up in the chat, pointing out that if we go back far enough, we're all black. The out of Africa thing, and you're talking tiny differences within our DNA that account for skin color differences and stuff.
But a lot of them do buy into this racist pseudoscience about IQs and things.
It's just like why would it be skin color? Why not like height? Like, why is there not some other factor of genetics that we choose to divide people on? Like, it's
Erica, please do not start a height war.
All the tall versus the shorts.
Where's the dividing line, though?
Yeah, well, if you have a single drop of short, then
yes. Oh my God, my dad's 6 foot, and my mum's like 5 foot nothing.
Oh.
Into high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's I think what it is for Erica's point is it's a combination of being highly visible, and to a great extent the fact that we went and enslaved a bunch of people.
Yeah, well, and I also think
from the societal
historically,
point of view, and it's persisted. But also, I was also going to say that there's one of the things that sort of came out in the aftermath of kind of like, okay, why was Trump elected, was that certainly in the US, there is this enormous swathe of America that's been left behind, and they need someone to blame. And it doesn't need to be particularly rational, but if they, and I think this is something that was covered in Andrew's talk on conspiracy theories, is that a lot of conspiracy theories are focused around making your own group feel good. And so if there is a large conspiracy to replace your group, then no wonder you haven't been able to get ahead if you have these massive forces working against you. And being so easily visible, it's no wonder that people, to a certain extent, just pointed and went, oh yeah, it's that one. She's different. Obviously different.
These concerns do seem to come up a lot more in places that are facing massive demographic changes. So
yes.
If you look at this outcry recently about critical race theory being taught in schools, the schools tend to be in districts where there has been a lot of demographic change in the last couple of years. So
I did see there was a brief poll that came out on Friday of teachers basically like, have you been speaking about critical race theory? And basically the overwhelming outcome of it was, well, we weren't speaking about it before, but now that everyone's banned it, now we're speaking about it constantly because all the kids are curious. What is it? Why are people upset? So it's one of those things like by banning it, they've made it the
Streisand effect.
In the forefront of people's mind. But like, did they have these people never had kids? Like, banning something is the best way to get your kids towards it. Anyway, sorry, slightly off.
What's the plan all along?
Yeah.
It's the Zog. The Zog.
They're one step ahead of us. Yeah.
So should we move on to Andrew's conspiracy theory? Your bid for the most dangerous conspiracy theory. And I will say, I don't know how you were feeling, Andrew, but I did not prepare as much as Chris did.
No, I did not. I did not prepare anywhere much.
Nobody should ever prepare as much as I did.
I feel quite nervous following that. I've spent most of the last 2 days researching this. That's pretty much as I've done. And I've been trying to get my talk down to a nice tight 5 minutes. So probably not going to have as much to say. So I'm going to be talking about the anti-vaccination conspiracy theories, and I've basically decided to take a somewhat different tact from Chris, in that I'm not actually going to talk about the conspiracy theories that much. My focus is basically vaccines save lives. And at the end of that is the take-home message that I want to get from my section of the talk. Evidence is overwhelming that if you get vaccinated against a condition, it will drastically reduce not only your risk of dying from it, but other people's risk of dying as a result of herd immunity. So, for example, it's estimated that during the 20th century alone, around 300 million people died of smallpox, with around 500 million people dying within the last 100 years of that disease. That works out as an average of like 5 million people a year dying from this condition. And yet, thanks to concerted vaccination programs, the World Health Organization announced in 1980 that smallpox had been eradicated. And since then, not a single person has died of a natural occurrence of smallpox. And vaccines work. Vaccines save lives. There are currently 30 different conditions that we have vaccines for, all of which are known killers. Vaccines are the reason that the vast majority of us don't know people who have died of things like cholera, diphtheria, tuberculosis, rabies, or typhoid fever. It's also the reason that the vast majority of, especially people sort of in the Western world, don't consider conditions like measles, mumps, or rubella things to worry about, despite the fact that all three of these conditions have high body counts attached to them. So, for example, if we look back to before the introduction of vaccines for measles, around 8,000 people a year, mainly children, were dying of measles in the US alone. But again, thanks to successful vaccination programs, in the year 2000, the World Health Organization announced that measles had been effectively eradicated from the United States. Vaccines save lives. Here, however, is a list of things vaccines don't do. Vaccines don't cause autism. Vaccines don't contain government microchips that allow them to track your every movement. That's your smartphone. Vaccines won't make your children sexually promiscuous. Vaccines can't control your mind. And vaccines are not evidence that you're in league with Lucifer. And yet these are all demonstrably false arguments that the anti-vaccination conspiracy theorists have put forward in an attempt to stop people getting vaccines. And this is despite the fact that, making these arguments could get themselves killed or kill someone else that they know. Sad thing is that these arguments work. So in 2018, in no small part due to the effects of growing anti-vaccination rhetoric on the internet, the number of people reporting confirmed cases of measles in the United States went up to 371. Remembering just a few years before it had been effectively eradicated. By 2019, in just 30 of the 50 states, that number had risen to 1,215. Here in the UK, 2019 was also the year that we lost our measles-free status as rates of childhood vaccinations fell across the board. Worldwide, measles is again on the rise, with an estimated 143,000 people dying from it in 2018, up from 124,000 the year before. And this is despite the fact that measles outbreaks are entirely preventable if enough of the population is effectively vaccinated. Which of course brings us on to the current pandemic. I've spent so much time making sure I didn't use the C word to not get, us criticized. And then, Chris comes along and just yells about Nazis for half an hour. So it's estimated that currently we're about 4.5 million people have died in the current pandemic. And sadly, that number continues to rise every day. Now, this is despite the fact that we have a number of effective vaccines out there. So why is this happening? Well, in recent months, reports have been coming out which paint a fairly clear picture. Again, if we look at the US, which are very good at producing these reports, and I find so many of the reports I'm finding are coming from America. In recent months, 97% of the people who've been hospitalized with the virus were unvaccinated. And around 99% of the people who died as a result of the virus were unvaccinated. Now, of course, obviously not everybody who is unvaccinated is an anti-vaxxer. Some are simply too young to get the vaccine yet. Some have medical conditions that mean they can't get it. And some simply haven't got around to it yet, or have genuine, reasonable concerns. There's a lot of, I think, reasonable concerns about, the vaccine seems to come out really quick. Is it safe? Do we know the long-term effects yet? And so people are waiting to see if more information comes out before they can make what they consider an informed decision. That's perfectly fine.
I also saw a study that showed that vaccine, like a lack of vaccine uptake in the US was correlated with like specific socioeconomic barriers to being able to get the vaccine, like not having a job where you can take a day off if you get side effects, or not having transport to go to a vaccine center, or childcare to watch your kids while you go, things like that. So like, at least, like, this data was from the US, but at least there can be other barriers to why it's not like simply straightforward. Like if you're working 3 jobs and like all of these things are going on, going to get the vaccine where you risk losing work for a day or two from side effects might not be worth it.
You're completely right. There's always people who are going to suffer more from these things. I mean, it makes me think of like voting in certain countries where you can't even get the day off to vote to do these things. So, and it's always the same sort of groups of people who suffer. But yeah, as I was saying, the problem with these unvaccinated people is the virus doesn't care whether you're unvaccinated based on ideological grounds or that you have a condition which stops you being able to get it. And so we see that unvaccinated people are much more likely to catch the virus, much more likely to be hospitalized as a result, and much more likely to die as an effect of it, which again brings me back to my core position that vaccines save lives. We have demonstrable figures coming in on a daily basis that show this. Of course, we all know that nothing is perfect. No vaccines are 100%. there's always people who get the condition even though they're vaccinated. And this is called breakthrough cases, where people who are vaccinated with the condition still get it. And we are currently seeing examples of that, yeah, with the current pandemic as well. There's a rise in breakthrough cases as well at the moment, which brings us on to a very important reason why everyone should get vaccinated if they can, and that is herd immunity. So for those who don't know, herd immunity is basically the point at which so many people in a population are vaccinated that it's practically impossible for the virus to pass around within the community, which means people who can't get vaccinated for whatever reason are protected by those who can. Great as it sounds, there are a number of issues when it comes to the current pandemic, and especially with the various variants that are coming out. It's currently estimated that we would require around 97% of the population in the UK to get vaccinated to develop herd immunity over here. Currently in the UK, we sit around depending on which source you look at, around 86 to 89% level, people who have received at least one dose of the vaccines. But unfortunately,
that's eligible people.
Yes.
No, it doesn't include, it's not the full population.
No, exactly. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. Unfortunately, there's concerns rising that we've reached our vaccine ceiling. The experts who are studying this think that it's unlikely we're going to go up more than a few percentage points in this regard, which means in this country, we are very unlikely to reach a herd immunity level for this condition.
Through vaccines.
Sorry.
Through vaccines.
Yes,
people can still get it and get immunity that way.
Yeah, through, but obviously with the variants and stuff, that's a question that's coming forward. So again, my take-home messages with this is vaccines save lives. You know, we have conditions that have been eradicated that killed millions due to vaccines. We have other conditions which were almost completely eradicated until the recent rise again of the anti-vaccination movement has reduced the number of people taking up vaccines. I want to, as I admitted to you guys earlier, I was still writing this beforehand, so the last bit is a little bit sporadic, but I want to talk about some of the other issues that are on the rise with the anti-vaccination movement. Obviously, I've not really talked about the conspiracies because at the end of the day, I don't really think that the crazy reasons that people have for rejecting these things are ultimately what's most important. What's most important is that there are people who are not only refusing to get vaccines for bad reasons, but are actively trying to stop other people getting vaccines. So recently, the rise in anti-vaccination extremism has been a problem. There are growing number of events where people are either verbally or physically abused for engaging, if for simply taking vaccines or helping other people to get vaccines. Teachers, medical professionals, people who publicly come out and say, I've had the vaccines, receive death threats on a regular basis based on this. In America, the group, the Proud Boys, which were involved in so many of the things that Chris was talking about, have recently turned their attention to undermining any attempts to allow people to get vaccinated, including violent attacks on people. Here in the UK, we're not as bad as in the States, I don't think, but it's definitely an issue. There was a story in the news just the other day about people putting up anti-mask, anti-vaccination posters in the tube with razor blades attached so that people would be injured when they tried to remove them. A completely anecdotal story today. As part of my job, I talk to GPs a lot, and I was speaking to a GP and we ended up talking about the anti-vaccination movement, and his practice has been protested. There are people standing outside yelling at his members of staff on a daily basis when they go into work, and they've spray painted things like murderer and stuff along the side of the building. Interesting things is that, as we talked about when we talked about conspiracy theories in general, a lot of this is driven by the internet. And so there's been a large rise in anti-vaxxer social media in the last couple of years. It's estimated that the largest British English language social media anti-vaxxer account has around 59 million followers. And of the top 147 anti-vaxxer accounts, they've seen an average increase of 19% viewership, followers, subscribers, whatever the correct term is, in the last few years. And so this is
subscribers isn't something we know much about.
We're not experts on the number of subscribers.
As we said, we're not monetizing this.
Yes, exactly. So this is definitely an issue that is on the rise. More and more people are getting attached to this. I think in part because the stories are out there. Social media makes it easier to push these things. There is genuinely concern. There are people with genuine questions, and sometimes it's easier to find those negative answers than it is the detailed scientific ones, as we talked about when we talked about flat earthers, which I was tempted to make the most dangerous conspiracy theory.
But it is one of those things where
conspiracy, without a doubt.
Yes, but I was just going to say that actually, and as an anti-vaxxer, the anti-vax population is much more evangelical about their belief. Like,
yes,
for those of us who are pro-vax, like, yes, of course you should get the vaccine. You'd be an idiot not to. And they're running around going, oh, you're going to make your kids autistic and murder you, and actually everyone's going to die from taking the COVID vaccine, so don't do it. Like, they're just, because they're not, scientific language and scientific people are naturally cautious, I think, in the way that they approach the sort of the information, whereas non-scientific people can be absolutely definite, and the problem is that people conflate confidence with competence, and so they think that these people actually are reliable.
That's why I was popular at uni. I was always confident, but no idea what I was talking about. But it's again comes down to what we talked about when we talked about flat earth memification of disinformation. It's so much easier to put out scary things about vaccines and stuff like that. Vaccines cause autism. There you go. To prove that that's not the case, here's 30 scientific papers that you have to read, but you might need a degree to understand them. It's not comparable. It's so much easier to make a false claim than it is to shoot it down. And so my opinion is that the anti-vaccination movement is the most dangerous conspiracy because it directly puts not only their own lives at risk, but potentially the lives of everyone on the planet.
Yeah, I heard of one woman in America. She didn't get the vaccine, and her cousin in Trinidad's friend's testicles became swollen because of that. So,
yes.
So for God's sake, get the vaccine, because you don't know
what
the knock-on effect could be
for
other people in your community.
So yes, that was my argument.
Good argument. Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah. Should we move on to Sam's argument?
So, climate change denial, and so naturally, any sort of history of climate change denial has to come alongside a history of climate change understanding. Essentially, it obviously, I suppose, climate change started with the Industrial Revolution. As that's when we sort of started emitting greenhouse gases, but really the science of climate change began probably in the late 1800s after an interesting experiment. And I haven't written many names down, and I'm not good at remembering them. So if you do want them, I can find them, but I'm gonna apologize.
Some guy.
But basically, after a quite cool experiment whereby a guy decided he was going to try and figure out the temperature of the moon, and was doing some calculations and went, I get different readings depending on whether or not the moon is directly overhead or whether it's sort of a relatively oblique angle. And he and his mate worked it through and basically came to the conclusion that actually there must be something in the atmosphere that is stopping his measuring of infrared wavelengths to and that was what was causing the changes in his readings, and that they kept working on it and theorized actually it was CO2. So that really is kind of the beginning of it. But that was a theory, and so scientists kept working, and in the 1950s they basically were able to confirm that CO2, methane, basically the greenhouse gases, could cause global warming, but they didn't really have a great grasp on exactly what quantities they would need and whether, and what environmental factors were in play. Basically, would these greenhouse gases be reabsorbed without naturally without them interacting? Basically, like, yes, in theory, there's a little bit of hazard here, but we're not quite sure. And then in the 60s, that sort of firmed up as they became more confident that actually they're not going to be reabsorbed into the oceans or into trees, I suppose, and obviously other greenery. Then in the 70s, we got to the point where actually we had computers and started developing computer models, and through all of this, basically, most of the research was done either by academic institutions or, curiously, by the fossil fuel industries. And yeah, well, but at this point, basically it's, oh yeah, this could happen, but we really don't know if it's going to do anything. And then the 80s came along and things got political. So in 1981, President Reagan decided that actually he was going to cut pretty much all the funding for atmospheric research. Not necessarily particularly targeting this because it was Reagan. He cut everything to the bone. That was just his way of governing. But a particular gentleman by the name of Al Gore, who some of you may have heard in connection to this topic.
He's a star in Futurama, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. President of the Moon, I think. Or I don't know. But basically, there was a massive debate, and they managed to save most of the funding. But that was really the sort of first time that it was debated out in the public domain in sort of a major political forum, and it sort of kicked off a bit of a back and forth tit for tat between what were, I'm going to call them legitimate climate skeptics at this point, because it wasn't, there wasn't a definite consensus in 1981, but there was mounting evidence, let's call it. So you had a very popular book from Sherwood Idso, which I've forgotten to take down the name of.
Another guy.
Like, oh yeah, no, I haven't. But basically, he basically introduced the premise that actually, yes, there is more CO2 in the atmosphere, but it's not causing harm. Actually, it's good. It's going to result in more crops and better climate. There's not basically kind of, yes, it's happening, but there's nothing to be worried about. The Environmental Protection Agency kind of countered with that, and a year later, and basically their sort of punchline was that climate change was not a theoretical problem, but a threat whose effects would be felt within a very few years. And it kind of went back and forth for a few years until basically a series of symposiums and studies and papers and basically between sort of 1986 and 1988, really, actually, all the good faith climate skeptics kind of went, yeah, okay, the evidence really is backing anthropogenic global warming. And so in response to this, the fossil fuel industry more or less set up a series of think tanks, advocacy agencies. So prominent one being the Global Climate Coalition, and they, using a small selection of scientists who continue to deny climate skepticism, basically went on the offensive. And there was really two main approaches that they took, which was that A, the climate wasn't changing, or B, it was changing, but it's not because of humans, and therefore we shouldn't do anything about it. And they had some small success for a couple of years, but in 1992 they brought in the big guns and hired a PR firm called APCO, who had previously done such wonders with the tobacco industry. And and basically they had a very clear goal, maybe is the right word, approach. And so in their own words, doubt is our product, since it is the best means of competing with the body of fact that exists in the minds of the general public. It is also the means of establishing controversy. And basically, since that point, their position has been to turn climate change from a fact into a theory, and then to discredit the theory, and to basically make it seem like actually there isn't a consensus among scientists. There isn't, this may or may not be happening, but no, who knows? It's just muddying the waters.
And this is all like motivated reasoning. Like there's a clear,
entirely motivated reasoning, and there is little doubt at this point that the fossil fuel industry that has backed this, and it's not to say that they were necessarily working with each other. There were cases where they definitely did work together, but obviously there's hundreds and thousands of firms that are doing this. So it's not like they all got together and went, hey, so let's promote this. But certainly some of them did, and some of them worked in concert. So I think it's a conspiracy, but it's not a grand conspiracy. But there are hearings at the moment, and you've got people within this who have said, yeah, so we did that, and we're maybe not. I personally maybe not too proud of that as the person speaking, but they've been moderately successful, and they've been, not only have they been trying to sort of throw it into doubt, they've also been casting dispersions on the other side. So there's sort of three main positions that they take up. A couple of them are personal gain. So they make they'll make the point that actually the scientists who are speaking about who are trying to back the position of anthropogenic global warming are doing it in order to secure book deals and speaking engagements, and so they're lining their own pockets with that.
All that lucrative science money that they're getting.
Yeah, you just see climate change scientists in their Lamborghinis and
the Rolex, hanging out with Drake.
The other sort of side of personal gain actually is that it's not the scientists themselves, but rather the inventors of the new green technology. It's Elon Musk and like whoever invents wind turbines, who are pushing this, and actually they're trying to take money out of the fossil fuel industry's pockets. And then the third one is that actually this is being used as a bit of a Trojan horse for other policies, and so the sort of liberal extremists are pushing climate change because it means they can use it as a carrier for communism. Is sort of the main. That's the main kind of the main thrust of the arguments. Which, if so, it's been a pretty poor vehicle. But have they been effective? Well, the consensus has been there since the 90s. Yes, we have the Climate Paris Accords, but it looks like we're going to certainly miss the first target of keeping below 1.5 degrees C by 2050. And at the moment, our best guess is that it will probably be on a couple of percent by 2050. Currently on 0.85%. Where's my notes? 0.85%. Probably be on a couple of percent by 2050, there or thereabouts, and look like we're heading up to probably 3.5% by the end of the 2000s, up to 20, basically by 2100. There we go. They've also had a certain amount of very mixed success in actually rolling back belief in the last couple of decades. So in a recent poll on climate change belief, the UK did really well. We were number one, 82%. But in the US, it's down at sort of 60%, which is a shame because in 2001 there was 75% belief in anthropogenic global warming. So they managed to knock 15 points off people's belief. And Andrew, I think, took the same tack I'm going to, as to like, okay, yes, this is, they've worked on this, that's allowed them to keep pushing fossil fuels. Like, I was presumably shocked like everyone else when it was announced, was it last year, that the UK is opening a new coal mine? Like, I thought we'd done away with that before I was born. That. Yes. Yeah. Somewhere, actually, I can't remember the details of it, but yes, we're opening a new coal mine. It was given the go-ahead during the pandemic, I think. Yeah. So what really is the cost of this? Because it's not just, this isn't arbitrary. It's not, oh, should we do green or should we do fossil fuels? Well, no, this has a knock-on impact. There was an analysis performed that looked at all deaths between the years 2000 and 2019, and by their estimation, nearly 10% of it could be attributed to climate change, which is roughly 5 million people a year, which is on par with Andrew's anti-vaccination numbers. And that's only going to go up. So there's another study looking at what would likely happen between 2030 and 2050 from an infectious disease point of view. So primarily malaria. It's probably going to be responsible for another 250,000 deaths a year between 2030 and 2050, and deaths due to malnutrition will probably be another 500,000 a year. And so, if you assume that actually the sort of nearly 10% of deaths between 2000 and 2019, which were caused due to extreme weather, let's say those increase slightly, you're looking at 6 million a year, quite easily. And the thing that worries me on this, in comparison with anti-vax conspiracies, is the amount of organization and the lag. Because ultimately, if we put our minds to it and we were able to convince people, we could roll out vaccines to the world in a decade on, if we have them available for pretty much all the diseases that we have. It took us 20 or 30 years to eradicate smallpox. It wasn't, through concerted effort, we can make rapid change. Can't do that with climate change, not on the scale that you can on anti-vax. So much of our infrastructure and our economy is built on the use of fossil fuels, on transportation that uses fossil fuels, and we can't swap everything over to batteries overnight. The ship is going in the same direction and the same speed as anti-vaxxers, but it's a big lumbering thing. It's going to take an age to turn. And so that is why I consider it the most dangerous conspiracy theory, because actually we are on this course, and yes, we have some control, and yes, we can try and turn this ship around, but it is going to take an age and an awful lot of effort.
I think climate change is definitely an existential threat, but is climate change denial still a serious thing? I mean, it feels like it's on the wane and it's had its heyday.
In the UK, yeah, we've done really well, but it's still going strong in the US. Biden announced last week that yes, climate change is real, but we're going to continue producing all of our fossil fuels in line with the previous administration. Thank you very much. We're not going to change anything. And nations like China and Indonesia are still creating enormous quantities of.
You mean India? Are you doing a Chris?
Oh, I mean Indonesia.
Oh, okay.
Because they are.
Can we not call that doing a Chris?
Like India's not great, but China and Indonesia are primarily coal powered.
But are they justifying it with climate change denial?
That's the question. Is it just we can't, we don't want to pay the money to do this. We're in the pockets of the big oil or whatever, or is it actually we're denying that it's even happening? Or how are you connecting those two?
So I know China far better than Indonesia in this case. China basically refuses to accept climate change as its official position is that it doesn't need to change its policies and that it's not having an impact on the rest of the world. So I would say yes, or at the very least, is it concerted climate change denial for their own personal gain? No, but is it at the same time a refusal to take reasonable action to prevent catastrophe? Absolutely. They are refusing to accept that climate change is a real thing that they are contributing to, and they're refusing to take the actions needed in order to prevent that. So I would say yes, that is due to climate change denial. And one might be able to argue that actually we should be taking greater action. I would argue that we should be taking greater action than we are today, and a denial of the impact of fossil fuels and sort of where we are heading is the reason why we are not taking action. We are relatively protected here in the UK, being an island with a large amount of water and a temperate climate. We are basically going to be among the least affected population in the world. But you have a look at it. The US is getting once in a century storms every couple of years, and wildfires that are well beyond what they previously were seeing because of the increase in the climate, and it is killing thousands of people and is just doing billions of dollars in property damage. The annual expected health cost of climate change denial is expected to reach about $4 billion annually by 2030. And so people are, the lack of action is itself evidence of denial, or the lack of appropriate action is evidence.
So is it that the denial and the conspiracy side of it is basically being used as an excuse to justify to the public why they're not putting more effort into countering it?
Yes. I think anyone who understands this issue knows that we should be taking much stronger action. And I think I say this as someone who is usually not particularly alarmist and who requires a fair amount of evidence. I mean, we're skeptics, will require evidence, but I tend to be a little more, I think, free market than most. But we need to get on this. But it.
Were you going to say something else?
No. It's put simply,
doom and gloom.
6 million deaths a year, only getting worse. Not people not taking action. Like that's the very short of it.
Well, in the chat, some people were talking about pizza, and that's a really great segue into my conspiracy theory, because it all starts with Pizzagate. That's right, I am talking about QAnon. And if you are 80% of Americans, you don't know. Yeah.
Chris is literally 80% of Americans.
So I was looking up some data about QAnon to prep for this, and most Americans, as of polls from about 6 months ago, didn't know what QAnon is. So it's worth defining it. It is. So do you remember the leaking of Hillary Clinton's emails? This is sort of the story of how it originated. After Hillary Clinton's emails were leaked, a guy on Twitter posted some stuff about how he's gone through the emails, and he can see that there's coded messages in there about a pedophile ring that Hillary Clinton is involved with, that is being run out of the basement of a well-known pizza parlor in Washington, D.C. And about 2 months later, so this is happening in 2016 during the election, the American election. At the time, Hillary Clinton lost. After the election was over, a guy got him, a man, a father, who had been reading all of this information, got a gun, got in his car, and drove from, I think it was North Carolina, to this pizza parlor in Washington, D.C., showed up with his gun to liberate the children that were being abused and tortured and killed in a basement. Not only were there no children there was not even a basement in which any of this could be happening. This guy was arrested. The whole thing, you would think, fizzles out, right? Wow, these were some people that had some really fringe beliefs, and they were clearly proved to be wrong, and game over. Then, a year later, another guy posts anonymously on the messaging board 4chan, and he calls himself, his handle has like Q, and it's like Q clearance something or other, and Q is an abbreviation used in American intelligence for somebody who has like a very high level of intelligence clearing. So that's why Q gets associated with the letter Q. And the poster, because he didn't realize,
he makes James Bond's gadgets, doesn't he?
Exactly. I hope not. But because he's anonymous, they call him QAnon for short. And we say him, we have no idea who this person is.
Hang on, Andrew's on mute.
I'm on mute. I was just making a pithy comment about the fact that Q being associated with the letter Q is probably something we can all agree with.
Oh, that was very good. That was very
timing.
Good.
Yes, timing is everything. Humor, yes.
Well, that's fine. So this person, decides to make a post. This is a year after, in the wake of this whole pizza. It's now called Pizzagate, like Watergate. It's this big conspiracy happening. And this guy posted about a year later in 2017, and he says, "I'm a government official. I've got top level clearance," and he starts posting this idea that there's this pedophile ring. There's something big is going to be coming, and you've all got to watch out. He originally posted this on 4chan. He ends up getting blocked off 4chan, moving to 8chan, which is another version of it. And
twice
then,
as bad.
Theoretically, yeah. And then after that, after he gets blocked off of 8chan, he moves to something else. But anyways, this person over the last 4 years has posted 5,000 messages about on this topic, really detailing this information that he allegedly has.
Well, not detailing. These are like Nostradamus style.
That's exactly it. They're very cryptic statements, and yeah, Nostradamus is a good analogy. It's not like it's in full sentences. There's a lot of abbreviations, and what it means is that the people who have become interested in the messages that he's sending then enjoy spending quite a lot of time decoding exactly what he's saying and inferring what it could mean. One of the big features of this conspiracy umbrella is it's not a single belief. It's a belief in an overarching organization, and then a variety of spin-off conspiracy theories can exist within it. One of the big things is that Donald Trump is a force for good. He's been, he's the only person in power that can be trusted. And this is why the QAnon conspiracy is so heavily linked to Trump, and also to the, any kind of insurrection designed to help, maintain him in power. These two things are very, very linked. And Trump has never denied, has never sort of outright denied anything that the QAnon conspiracists believe in, which further fuels the fire, because they can interpret any ambiguous remark that he makes in any context as being somehow related to something that the mysterious Q figure has posted.
Well, thank God Trump doesn't make random ambiguous comments.
Exactly.
He's too busy playing 4D chess. So,
Yeah, and I wanted to show you guys just a bit of data about what it is.
will there be spreadsheets?
There are no. So if I do this,
sorry, audience, no spreadsheets this time.
No spreadsheets. So you're seeing results of a survey that was done in the US in March 2021 about sort of three of the core beliefs of the QAnon conspiracy. One is that the government, media, and financial worlds in the US are controlled by a group of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who run a global sex trafficking operation. Not necessarily out of a pizza shop. Could be a burger place, but what's astonishing is you've got 15% of all Americans say yes, that is true. And obviously, what you're seeing here is the breakdown according to political belief. The second thing that they believe in is that there is a storm coming soon that will, and storm is a metaphor. It actually comes from a comment that Trump made that was then interpreted as being significant in some way. There is a storm coming soon that will sweep away the elites and restore the rightful leaders. Yep. And the third thing is that because things have gotten so far off track, true American patriots may have to resort to violence in order to save our country. And these three things are very attractive to the people in the conspiracy theory who are interested in it. What I think is really interesting, and the reason why I think it's the most dangerous conspiracy theory, is because it is new, it is growing rapidly, it is inciting people to violence, and it can incorporate almost any other conspiracy belief. And what is very interesting about the time in which this conspiracy theory arose, it arose in a time when people had vastly reduced face-to-face contact. They were driven to the internet as a source of entertainment. Many writers have explained how the fact that you have to decode what's actually going on yourself and do your own research, it becomes like a live action game that you are participating in. It becomes it's addictive in the same way that like people find sleuthing about who's committed a crime.
I've seen defenders describe it as the only conspiracy theory that teaches you to think for yourself.
Yeah. Exactly. And people find it incredibly addictive. There's also elements of this that you can see have a lot of similarities with Christian ideology. This idea that there is a savior, that there is a storm coming, that there is a hostile environment that you are in. Not only is this similar to Christian ideology, actually the circumstances are similar to the circumstances in which Christianity itself arose, where you had it was a religion in a sort of decaying empire, a religion of people who were disenfranchised, who were slaves, who had nothing to hope for. And there, many theories about why Christianity was so popular is because it spread among people. It gave them hope, and it spoke to them in a way that the existing mainstream couldn't. I want to just end with a little bit more data about why, when I say that it incorporates other conspiracy theories, what exactly I mean. You can look up this PRI QAnon conspiracy thing. By the way, all of the data is fascinating. But I wanted to show you this. So this is evidence that shows how QAnon conspiracy belief correlates with belief in other conspiracies. So the bands are divided into the average of all Americans surveyed. The believers are those who believe in QAnon conspiracies. The doubters are those who aren't sure about QAnon. And the rejectors are those who reject QAnon conspiracies. And you can see that QAnon belief is highly correlated with the belief that the COVID vaccine contains a surveillance microchip. And that is a sign of the beast in biblical prophecy.
Why did I cheer that?
yeah, exactly. And what's incredible is 85% believe that it was created in a lab. And obviously then a very high belief that the 2020 American election was stolen by Trump. And I haven't seen data for how it connects to climate change belief or white supremacy belief, but anecdotally we know that it has a very broad appeal, that any conspiracy theory can be welcomed into this movement because it's amorphous. But what's also interesting is that whereas a lot of conspiracy theories are particularly attractive to men, anecdotally, more recently, I've seen data from 2018 which suggested that QAnon was still fairly common in men rather than in women. More recently, a lot of women are gravitating to QAnon conspiracy belief too. So, in conclusion, I think that I have presented the most dangerous conspiracy theory because it incorporates all of yours and it's on the rise. And so this is the one.
This is why you wanted to go last.
This is why I wanted to go.
Yeah, I mean, we know the conspiracy theories are interrelated, and if you believe in one, you're likely to believe in another. But yeah, QAnon, I think, has been described as the mother of all conspiracy theories.
I think when we were talked about conspiracy theories before, we looked at sort of the way in which people who feel that they're on a decline in power, so to speak, cling to conspiracy theories. And I can totally see why it's been embraced by people who are on the losing side of the most recent election in America, and how they're.
But it was embraced by the people on the winning side of the election before that, which is unusual.
Yeah, that's very strange. But they used it to explain anything that was negative. You know, if Donald Trump couldn't get something done, it was
didn't get the popular votes,
conspiracies and stuff like that.
But also, it's still it's the same as I think we talked about before, in that, yes, okay, they won the election, but they still feel like they're losing overall and have been for 20 years. Like, it's, QAnon doesn't appeal to like New York Republicans, it appeals to like Tennessee Republicans. It's generally Republicans. Like, it's the left behind communities.
But not exclusively. Like the data, yes, that I showed you, yes, it shows a swing towards Republicans, but it's yes, that swing is statistically significant, but it's not exclusively. I also picked it when we were talking about doing this topic. I just Googled most dangerous conspiracy theory, and Google search algorithms led me to this one. So sorry, guys.
Has anyone thought about how the hell we're going to end this stream?
Yes, I have.
Let's start drinking.
No, we want to invite people to do a poll and let the audience decide which is the most dangerous conspiracy theory.
I was wondering, does anyone have any dishonorable mentions that they'd like to add to the list? I know Andrew mentioned Flat Earth, and I think
I mentioned Flat Earth because I am,
obsessed. You're obsessed.
Mentioned Flat Earth every single time. So I think it's a gateway conspiracy. I think.
Really, isn't it one of the more extreme ones?
No, I think it's much like QAnon. If you get into Flat Earth, it's very easy to link every other thing going on.
Well, yeah, if you believe a lie that big, then
if they're telling you a lie that big, you can't trust anything else they say. And so a lot of flat earthers tend to believe in a wide variety of conspiracies as well. But I'm not saying it's dangerous. I spend a lot of time, immersed in watching flat earth information on the internet because I clearly have no life. But I've yet to come across anyone who I would consider dangerous in that community. Misguided, sometimes a little pathetic if I'm a bit mean, but genuinely there are a lot of people who are like looking for truth and going down the wrong way for it. So I don't think they're dangerous. I think some of the other beliefs they hold may be dangerous as a result of it, but I don't think it itself is a dangerous conspiracy theory.
Someone in the chat mentioned 5G. Is that
5G direct?
Is that one we're concerned?
Yeah.
Is that one we should be concerned about?
Well, it's the cause of the pandemic, so clearly, yes, it's dangerous.
What else have we got?
I was thinking of also doing the 9/11 truthers as a dangerous conspiracy belief, but when I thought about it, it was because I think a lot of that American lack of faith in their own government then spilled over into QAnon, and so that was why I ultimately didn't go for it. And also because I think QAnon has the potential to be a lot more global. Like anecdotally, I've seen things that people all around the world can get sucked into it.
I think 911 was definitely a gateway conspiracy theory at the time.
Yeah.
It's one of the ones that got me into conspiracy theries back when I was a believer. So. But yeah, I think that's well past its heyday now.
Yeah.
What else? We got David Icke and his reptilian.
Yeah, but that's
overlords.
true. So
That was true.
yeah, we're
Yeah, but what about the people denying it?
yeah. Oh yeah, people deny
Reptilian deniers.
Well, that is a dangerous conspiracy. Definitely.
Any more for the dishonourable mentions?
We have to wait a few seconds because obviously there's a bit of a delay on the stream. So
Okay, I'm gonna say
mentions quickly.
crop circles,
Crop circles.
100%.
Aliens have visited Earth. Yes.
And they decided to draw pretty patterns.
Moon landings.
What's the danger here? More bad M. Night Shyamalan movies?
Oh God, no.
Poor
I
artistic
think we've got a winner.
style.
Ruining crops.
Right. So yes, anybody in the chat, we have posted a link to the poll, so you can all vote on which of our 4 conspiracy theories you think were the most dangerous. Sam, if you can stick the link in again, because it's gone quite high up the chat again.
Oh yeah.
So please vote. We'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Am I allowed to vote?
We were
At the moment,
we will announce the winner
it's a three-way
next time.
split.
But
It's a
by
three-way
winner,
split.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's the best.
And next time we'll be debating the fluffiest bunnies or something, because really
Yes,
I don't want to go through this again.
I was thinking we could debate who is the most influential skeptic in all of history.
Oh, okay.
Wow, that's an interesting one. But we do kind of have a topic for next time.
We do
maybe.
for next time, yeah.
So everything going to plan, and these things are somewhat up in the air. We may have our first guest speaker next time. Let me just find his details. I had it on the screen and have now lost it. We are getting in. Here we go. A chap called Tom Garris. I'm sure I'm pronouncing his surname correctly. Who is an astronomer. He is also an author, works with the Royal Observatory. And for those of you who have been in the skeptics community for as long as I have on YouTube, you may remember him as Andromeda's Wake, who did a lot of skeptic YouTube videos related to astronomy back in the day. And so all things going to plan, as long as his publicist doesn't have him on his new book tour. He's just released a new book, and so he's very busy at the moment. He will be joining us next time in 2 weeks' time. If not, we'll come up with, the best cat meals. I don't know, something like that. So,
Awesome. So should we leave it there?
yes, I think we
Amazing. If anyone wants to give us suggestions for something else you want to see us debate another time, we'd love to have it. Fill out the poll, which you can see in the chat. We can probably add it to the video description too, for people coming back later. Good.